Starting at number 10. The remembrance of Allah. The religion of Islam is all about making and keeping a connection with God. This is how Islam deals with sadness and worry. And according to the Quran, this is what it says. Those who have believed and whose hearts are assured by the remembrance of Allah, unquestionably by the remembrance of Allah, hearts are assured. And this is taken from Surah 13, verses 28. Now, moving on to number 9, there's unwavering faith in God. Now, it's important to note that there are 3 key points that will allow a believer in Islam to free themselves from their depression. Those are patience, gratitude, and trusting God. And the Arabic language, it's sabr, shukr, and tawakkul. First, let's look at patience. In the Quran, it says this: O you who have believed, seek help through patience and prayer. Indeed, Allah is with the patient. That's taken from Surah 2, verses 153. And then the Quran continues on in affirming this by saying, and we will surely test you with something of fear and hunger and loss of wealth and lives and fruits, but give good tidings to the patient. And that's from Surah 2, verses 155. Now, the second thing to look at is gratitude. And in the Quran, it says this: so remember me, I will remember you, and be grateful to me and do not deny me. And that's found in Surah 2, verses 152. And the third thing to look at, I mentioned, is trust in God. And the Quran speaks about this, and it says, if God helps you, none can overcome you. And if he forsakes you, who is there after him that can help you? And in God alone, let believers put their trust. And that's found in Surah 3, verses 160. Now, number 8 brings us to an interesting concept, the concept of looking at other people around you. This is actually something that can help depression. Now, the Prophet Muhammad is reported to have said these words: whenever you see someone better than you in wealth, face, or figure, you should look at someone inferior to you in these respects. And that's taken from the Hadith, Bukhari, and Muslim. Now, number 7, let's look at glad tidings. And we can find this reference in Surah 41, verses 30 to 31 of the Quran. It says, indeed, those who have said, our Lord is Allah, and then remained on the right course, the angels will descend upon them, saying, do not fear and do not grieve, but receive good tidings of paradise, which you were promised. We were your allies in the worldly life and in the hereafter, and you will have therein whatever your soul desires, and you will have therein whatever you request. Now, you see, it's taught that the objective of these verses is to mention the coming down of the angels on those who are struggling with their lives, so that they are consoled and encouraged. This verse acknowledges the grief of people that they experience in this life, and once again, it shifts the focus and the perspective to an optimistic outcome, which is free of depression and anxieties. Next up at number 6, we look at hopefulness. Muslims are encouraged to resist negative thoughts with positive thoughts and actions if possible, or seek professional help if the case is clinical, exactly like any other form of illness. Now, we find a reference to this in the Quran, Surah 94, verses 5 to 6, and that says, for indeed with hardships will be ease. Indeed with hardships will be ease. Islam also encourages people to stay hopeful. Even if somebody has committed the worst sin or is involved in a very difficult life event, there's always God's mercy to fall back on. Indeed, no one despairs of relief from Allah except the disbelieving people. And that reference is in the Quran, Surah 12, verses 87. So continuing on with this episode, we got to go to number 5 next, and that looks at trust. People who have patience and trust in God's decree will be given a reward from Him. Now, in a hadith, Prophet Muhammad had said these words: no Muslim is struck with an affliction and then says, truly to Allah we belong and truly to Him we shall return, when the affliction strikes, and then says, O Allah, reward me for my loss and give me what is better than it. But Allah will do just that. Next up, at number 4, we look at meditation therapy. There are several stories from the hadith of the Prophet Muhammad isolating himself so that he could engage in deep contemplation or meditation practices. Now, the Quran does describe Muslims that are involved in such practices. And it says, "Who remembers Allah while standing or sitting or lying on their sides and give thought to the creation of the heavens and the earth, saying, O Lord, you did not create this aimlessly. Exalted are you above such a thing. Then protect us from the punishment of the fire." And that's found in Surah 3, verses 191. So you see, there it points to the practice of meditation towards God, regardless of the situation that you find yourself in, whether you're standing or lying down or sitting down, whatever. Moving on to number 3, addressing issues. Apart from the religious practices and rituals, Muslims believe that when something bad is happening, the best solution is to change the situation. Sometimes depression is triggered by oppressive relationships, as well as unhealthy work boundaries or a negative self-talk that we sometimes put ourselves through. And when these types of issues are the cause of depression, Muslims should use their reason to identify the pros and the cons of a decision and to consult with trustworthy people. Now, over in the Quran, when we look at Surah 3, verses 159, we'll find this following passage. "So pardon them and ask forgiveness for them and consult them in the matter. And when you have decided, then rely upon Allah. Indeed, Allah loves those who rely upon Him." Reading Surah Ad-Duha is at number 2. Surah Ad-Duha is Surah 93 in the Quran, and it is said to have been revealed at the time when Prophet Muhammad was depressed with the intention to comfort him. The surah reminds the Prophet Muhammad of the blessings that Allah has opened for him and asks him to help the poor and the needy and to make mention of the blessings of Allah upon him. And at number 1, it's only fitting that we end off on the note of seeking professional help. Now, we did mention this a little bit earlier in this episode, but let's elaborate a little bit more. Treating disease medically is legitimate, and it does not contradict reliance on God. The Prophet Muhammad has actually said these words in the hadith: "Use medicine, for God does not send an illness without sending a cure." And also, religious scholars often insist that individuals fulfill their obligation of using scientifically established medical procedures as a practical step in addition to asking God for assistance in their recovery. This helps to avoid a situation in which Muslims rely exclusively on prayer while avoiding vital medication and treatment. We have number 10 first, at birth. There are some practices there. When a child is born, Islam encourages Muslims to maintain a high level of cleanliness and purity concerning him or her, as this has a great impact on the mind and the soul of that child. Now, if parents neglect this duty, they should answer before God for the consequences. Similarly, circumcision of the male child, preferably on the 7th day, is a mandatory Islamic custom. Now, that is because it prevents the child against possible infections. Number 9, we have ablutions, which are wudu and ghusl. So ablutions, wudu, and ghusl are considered as very crucial parts for prayer or salat in Islam. In fact, under normal circumstances, a Muslim cannot offer prayers with an unclean body, clothes, or having a dirty place. Muslims are also encouraged to clean with pure water and keep it safe from any other forms of impurities. There's also some practices when it comes to personal hygiene. Of course, cleanliness of the intimate parts of the body with water or other cleansing materials after using the bathroom are parts of Islamic customs. Similarly, Muslims are encouraged to clip their nails regularly, as well as shave their hair and their armpits and other hair on different parts of their body, just to be as hygienically clean as possible. There's also some practices when it comes to oral hygiene. So Muslims are encouraged to trim their mustaches in order to make it easier for you to eat food. It's not getting caught up in your hair or anything like that. So definitely you're encouraged to keep your mouth clean, have a good physical appearance, as well as use fragrances. Even Muslims look at the statement of the Prophet Muhammad that says, "Gabriel continuously ordered me to clean my teeth until I thought it would be made compulsory." Now let's look at food hygiene in Islam. So in the Quran, as well as in narrations or the hadith, there's a lot of emphasis that's been put on cleanliness and purity of foods and drink. So there's a lot of importance attached to this because it has to do with the well-being of your body as well as the soul. And Islam encourages the entire human race, not just Muslims actually, to consume hygienically and consume pure and lawful foods. So pretty much eat as healthy as possible. And it also forbids the consumption of certain foods like certain animals like dogs and pigs, and the use of intoxicants. At number 5, we have exercising and maintaining health. Although there's no verse in the Quran specific when it comes to exercise recommendations, but Muslims take a look at the Prophet Muhammad's life for recommendations. So he advised all Muslims to teach their children how to swim, teach them to do archery, ride on horseback, and he himself used to walk at a very fast pace and even race with his wife. Also, he used to work with his hands, whether at home or when he was out with his companions collecting firewood, all sorts of things. So he was physically active, and Muslims look at that as an example to stay physically active as well. Now, we talked about this briefly, but alcohol consumption is forbidden in Islam. This is probably the most popular dietary restriction. According to the health website webmd.com, not only does alcohol cause cirrhosis of the liver as well as reduce concentration, but it can also contribute to conditions like cancer as well as cardiovascular disease and even Alzheimer's. Now, the practice at number 3 is moderation in your diet. So inside of Islam, they emphasize moderation. So not too much, not too little in every aspect of life. Now, the second half of verse 31 of Surah Al-Araf states, "Eat and drink, but be not excessive. Indeed, he likes not those who commit excess." Now, there's a hadith that advises Muslims to leave 1/3 of the belly with food, another third with drink, and leave another third empty for easy breathing. And of course, when it comes to diet, science has shown us that eating too much can actually contribute to weight gain and obesity, as well as many other health concerns that come from that. Similarly, eating too little can result in your body not receiving the nutrients that it needs, which also has its own slew of medical conditions. The practice number 2 is eating black seeds. So Islamic teachings actually insist that black seeds should be a part of your daily diet. Abu Hurairah states, "I have heard from the Prophet that there is cure for every disease in black seeds except death. In seed or powder form, kalanji, which is known as fennel flour, can reduce obesity as well as help digestion, treat several digestive disorders, reduce blood pressure, treat congestion, and the kalanji oil has proven to be effective when it comes to reducing joint pain as well as inflammation." And finally, this last practice, eating slow. This is a big one. Like, I struggle with this too because food is just so good. But Islamic teachings encourages followers to eat slowly and chew properly before swallowing, because it takes your brain some time to register that your stomach is full. So eating slowly actually ensures that you have not eaten too much before your brain actually receives the signals. Another benefit is that eating slowly and mindfully helps you eat less, and it also enhances the pleasure of eating. So if you love food, eat it slow. Savor every bite. At number 10, we have surgery. So check it out. In the field of medicine, Dr. Al-Zawahiri, he got the title of father of surgery. Now, Al-Zawahiri, around the year 1000, he published a 1,500 page illustrated encyclopedia of surgery that was used in Europe as a medical reference for the next 500 years. So he discovered the use of dissolving cat gut to stitch wounds beforehand, because a second surgery had to be performed to remove sutures. He also performed the first cesarean operation, and he created the first pair of forceps, and he's said to be the inventor of more than 200 tools used in medicine. His book Al-Tasrif contains information about various medical diseases and treatments and surgical procedures. Al-Tasrif was translated into many different languages like Latin, and it actually served as a complete guide for medical students. Moving on to number 9, we have coffee. This is a very interesting one. So who doesn't love coffee, right? Well, the credit for this invention goes to an Ethiopian herder named Kaldi. More than 1,200 years ago, people were struggling to stay awake when a herd of curious goats and their watchful master discovered this life-changing substance. So Kaldi, he noticed that as his goats were grazing grazing on the slopes, they became active and excited after eating a particular berry. Kali, he shared his discovery with the abbot of the local monastery, who made a drink with the berries and found that it kept him alert through his long hours of evening prayers also. He shared the discovery with other monks, and then the word spread and coffee was introduced to the world. Next up on our list, we have the camera, which is also linked to a Muslim scientist, Ibn al-Haytham, who revolutionized the field of optics. He rejected the Greek idea that an invisible light emitted from the eye that caused sight, and instead he stated that vision was caused by light reflecting off an object and entering the eye. So he provided proof of his theory by using a dark room with a pinhole on one side, and on the other side there was a white sheet. So light came through a hole and projected an inverted image of the objects outside of the room on the sheet that was on the opposite side. He called this the camera, and it was the world's first camera obscura, which of course now leads to the cameras as we know them today. Number 7 is universities. The first university was founded by a Muslim woman. In the year 859, a young princess named Fatima al-Firhi, she founded the first degree granting university in Fez, Morocco, and her sister Miriam founded an adjacent mosque. Together, the complex became known as the Al-Qawareen Mosque, which soon developed into a place for religious instruction and political discussion. It was named the first university in history and provided education on all types of subjects. Along with astronomy, their students studied the Quran, of course, and theology, as well as law, rhetoric, and writing, logic, arithmetic, geography, medicine, you name it, they were studying it. The crazy thing is, it's still in operation more than 1200 years after, and this is definitely a woman who has inspired women all across the world. Number 6 leads us to the flying machine. You'll definitely be surprised to know that the first person to attempt and succeed in making a flying machine was a Muslim named Abbas ibn Firnas. In the 9th century, he designed a winged apparatus loosely resembling a bird, and his most famous trial took place near Cordoba in Spain, where he flew the machine upward for a few seconds before plummeting to the ground and partially breaking his back. Ouch. Now, 600 years later, his design inspired the famous Italian artist and inventor Leonardo da Vinci to draw up plans of his own flying machine. And then, of course, we know where that led, and now we have airplanes today. Number 5 leads us to the toothbrush. So for the first time, the concept of toothbrushes was introduced by Prophet Muhammad actually. He popularized the use of the first toothbrush around the year 600. Using a twig from the miswak tree, he cleaned his teeth and freshened his breath. Substances similar to miswak are now used in modern toothpaste. Alright guys, at number 4, who likes algebra? Well, yeah, it comes from another Muslim. The word algebra actually comes from the title of a Persian mathematician's famous 9th century treatise, the Kitab al-Jabr wal Muqabbala. And then when you translate that, it translates to the book of reasoning and balancing. Al-Khwarizmi moved away from the Greek concept of mathematics, which was essentially based on geometry, and introduced some new ideas to it. He systemized the Greek and Hindu mathematical knowledge, introduced a method of counting based on numerals and decimal systems for the first time, and used zeros, and introduced the concept of raising a number to a power. So yeah, definitely mathematics, like algebra, very useful to this day, but probably not the most enjoyable subject in school. To me anyways. Now for number 3, let's look at maps. So today we have modern technology that helps us travel to any place we like. Load up our phone, Google Maps is right there. But it was actually Muslims that introduced the concept of map. In the 7th century, Muslims were inspired to leave their homes and travel for trade and for religious reasons to explore the world that, of course, they lived on. And they walked different routes and observed people and places, and they shared their encounters with others when they came back. So first, this was by word of mouth, but with the introduction of paper in Baghdad in the 8th century, the first maps and travel guides were produced. From there, in our number 2 spot is cleanliness and hygiene. So it's not that Muslims invented being clean and being hygienic, no, but they definitely contributed greatly to the field. In the 13th century, the engineer Al-Jazari wrote a book describing mechanical devices, including wudu machines. So these wudu machines provided enough water for ablution, which is the Muslim ritual of washing yourself before prayer and things like that. And also it conserved a lot of water. Muslims came up with the concept of soaps by mixing oil with alkali, which is a salt-like substance that was boiled to achieve the right mix, left to harden, and then used in the bathhouse. Al-Kindi also wrote a book of perfumes called The Book of the Chemistry of Perfume and Distillations. His book contained more than 100 recipes for fragrant oils, salves, as well as aromatic water. The centuries-old perfume making tradition was made possible by Muslim chemists and their distillation methods. They distilled plants and flowers and made perfumes and substances for therapeutic pharmacy. So yeah, we have several contributors there for number 2, but we move on to number 1. We end this episode off with the crank. Muslims have contributed indirectly to modern automatics. The revolutionary crank connecting rod system was first put to use by Muslims. By converting rotary motion to linear motion, the crank enables lifting heavy objects with relative ease. Al-Jazari discovered this technology in the 12th century, and it spread across the globe like wildfire, leading to everything from the bicycle to the internal combustion engine.